Hello everybody and welcome to yet another video here on the Misplay LLC channel. Today we're going to be going right back to another Toga deck, but this time instead of looking at Toga 3, we're going to be looking at the Return of the Gamer, Toga 1 on the evil symbol. So a quick brief history over Toga 1 and Gamer Toga in general. The deck dates all the way back to set 2 when Toga and Alleyway Ambush first came out. The whole motif behind the deck was to just basically play a long string of attacks. Sometimes you may slink in a foundation, getting to 5 cards in card pool so that you're able to just keep slamming alleyway ambushes down on a 5, ignoring the progressive, and hoping that's just enough to finish off the last bit of rival's health. Most of the time you saw Toga 1 early on, before even Gamer Toga was on the life symbol. You would have seen mid-range Toga, which was way back in the RIP Frog Lashing days. But right after the Frog Lashing ban, the character kind of disappeared for a little bit before resurging at some of the bigger events with Gamer Toga, where we saw it come up. List has been seeing less and less play on both of its life symbol and the death symbol, which was also played a little bit on for a similar gamer strategy. Just as power creep and other things happen that kind of put 7-handers that don't have much defense on face kind of out of the picture. But we're finally getting back to a point where just maybe this deck's aggro, and whenever it does go off, is enough to actually compete. So we're going to be talking about that in this video. Quick brief look over the deck list is it's a tight 60 card deck. It's got 20 highs, 20 mids, 20 lows, and we'll go a little bit more into detail further on talking about these cards. Some cards just briefly to talk about that aren't necessarily 100% sells in the deck, but I kind of liked, and I've been enjoying them in testing. Main one I want to talk about is Gigantification Swing. It's an SR that I sadly don't have an image coming up for, but you can spend 1 momentum and then all of your charge, fury, it's like 4 different keywords. They all get +1 on your checks throughout the entire string. So it just helps you string out if you ever had a poke turn where you just happen to snag momentum. It also has an on-play response that gives your rival's next check -2, making it harder to block that one, or if they choose not to block that one, harder to block one down the line. Basically, their first block or first time they try to play an action, they're going to have a little bit of a discount to that check, making it a little bit harder for them to pass, which never really bad. It's a 5 diff, which kind of is sketch for the deck because it doesn't really feel that great whenever you're having to play it second or third in the card pool, but it does come up a good bit. Falling Crush is also pretty cool. It's going to be a big enabler for combined firepower and other things like that we'll talk about. Just has the enhance of remove, this attack gets +2 damage. It's got a good block mod on it. It's a 3 diff attack, which exact opposite it's a polar opposite of Gigantification Swing being a 5 diff. It's a more niche card in the deck, but I feel like the 3 diff actually does come up a lot because you're able to slam it much later in the string and not have to commit as many resources. As for the foundations are pretty straightforward. I think we're going to actually talk about most of them. We are playing a good bit of the Hiei foundations that either sap you for stats or if you're below 10 or less, which you can easily manipulate and control your life if you're careful with it to get for more free stats. It's one of the things we're going to talk about is this character loves to get the free stats on each move. We're playing a long streak. We want to be able to give as many of those free stats as possible. We're going to first talk about some of the reskins and why I feel like this deck on the evil symbol is pretty close to what it used to be on the life symbol. So your defense interaction, Life Toga was able to use a large amount of solid defensive foundations that Life had, whether it was Release, another great card, just always giving +2 to your checks on blocks. Encouraging Training Partner was the OG speed reset. Just not a true reset because it always sets it to 4, but you get the gist. And then we have Rescue Completed, which just lets us commit our face down resources or some of our stuff that we can re-ready excuse me, for more free stats, either on our offense or giving it the -2 speed on defense. Next, we have another big part of the Gamer Toga strategy from way back in the day was Someone with Style. It's got a pretty decent stun hate response on it. We're not going to talk too much about that. The main thing it was used for was that enhance once per turn. You can destroy a foundation, ready this foundation, playable while committed. Now, cards long since rotated, being part of the set 1 casualties, just like the cards above. But we now have incompatible quirks, which is pretty much the same card. It's got basically the same enhance playable while committed. You can instead remove a foundation, and then you just get to re-ready it. So, pretty sick. It is unique, which kind of is a debuff, but it also isn't once per turn, so the need for multiples isn't as drastic. I also personally believe it has a better defensive defensive ability on it, in that The other one's pretty reliant on your rival playing stun, which may or may not be seen. Obviously, with Toga 3 and other decks like that, we're seeing it a good bit, but it does specify stun ability, so like Toga 3 response doesn't even trigger someone with style. But the commit for -2 speed is just always going to be relevant. You're always going to be able to usually find a spot for that to slink in to actually have it matter. Some further reskins we're going to talk about is this deck makes or breaks on the card draw. Whether it's your attacks drawing you attacks like we used to have with Future Charge, it's the foundations like Passing the Torch that can just commit to get us cards or draw us to it. We were on the last leg. We have just as many of those, if not more, that just do solid enough card draw that we feel. We have Vital Seasoning, which is either going to be stun 2 most of the time, or we have 45% power, which is just straight up free card draw because everyone's going to build to 4 foundations at that point. And then we also have Sword of Darkness Flame, which is kind of a niche one because you're not always going to have it in the early game. But getting to 10, like I said earlier, isn't the most impossible thing. We have a good bit of manipulation with our health total just because we can ping on every attack. But yeah, as long as you're not using the Excited for Blood response to gain health, it shouldn't be that hard for you to get chunked pretty low. As we move on to the next one, we have the old faves, cards that we still have around that all were playable on the life symbol and all just so happen to have the evil symbol. We got Alleyway Ambush, obviously old reliable on the infinity symbols. It's the whole main point of the deck. It's what we have as the payoff. It's how we finish games off whenever our rival just has 5 or 10 health left. We have Excited for Blood. It's the signature foundation that came with Toga 1. She had a very small kit in set 2. It was just this card, herself, and then Knife Slice. A 5-diff uncommon attack, so nothing too crazy. But this card, however, for a very long time was considered one of the best foundations in the game. In Toga 1, we're always going to be able to proc it pretty much because on block, lose 1 health just from Toga's in-hands means that our rival will usually be losing some sort of health on their turn for us to get the free draw. And the gain 4 is also just huge. We have Bench Press. This is just a Toga 1 card that happens to have Shoji's face on it. This card has all 3 of her symbols. She turns on that top enhance for +1 damage to all of our moves as easy as anyone else. And the enhance flip actually can come up. Gaining 2 health whenever your rival may have been on their last move. Or, I'm sorry, the move before. Because if you do die to a tax damage, you do not gain the 2 health. That said, using this on like their second to last move when they only have 1 more and know their ways to get it can sometimes just end their turn and give you that one last chance you need to go for the game. Floating Around My Babies, just like Bench Press, free +1 damage essentially to our moves. Removing the top 3 can be scary if you're going for a long game. We're not really going for the long game. If we're kind of playing a long game on Toga 1, it's not unwinnable, but it's not really the scenario we want to be in. We want to kind of build for the first turn, maybe 2, and then try to find a game. Now we have some of our new goodies. We have Combined Firepower, 45% power, and Incubating that we'll kind of spotlight briefly, just talking about. We've got, first off, Combined Firepower. This is my personal favorite of all the new stuff that we got. This card, excuse me. This card, Enhanced Mill 4, this deck gets +1 damage for each non-foundation build. So it's another free way to get damage. The big things are the response and the passive. Response, discard pile. After you remove a card to pay a cost, you can play this card during this attack. So as we're checking, just making plays, these will find their way into the discard pile, and they're just sitting there. This is where that kind of synergizes with the Gamer Toga strategy. Is when we look at the passive, this card does not count towards progressive difficulty. This is a free card in our card pool that lets us get to 5 without having to worry about more difficult checks. Quite literally, all 3 of the abilities are things we kind of just love. Having it, being able to use a resource from outside of our hands so that we can truly rely on just trying to draw and discard, filter our way through for more attacks, hopefully the alleyways. And then we have the Ignoring Progressive so that we don't have to worry about hard checks. And then just free damage, which is the main thing Toga looks for since she gives speed on phase. It's just very good. We have plenty of ways to turn it on. The Incompatible Quirks turns it on. Floating Around My Babies turns it on. Incubating, sadly, we have our attack -1 speed, but it turns it on. Like I said earlier, the attacks, some of the attacks remove for cost. It's just not as hard to turn on as one would think. Next up, we have 45% power coming alongside the Sword of Darkness Flame. Going in with Battle Seasoning and like all the other, I kind of talked about the card draw already, so we'll be pretty brief with this one. The deck needs to draw as many cards as possible. We need to find our alleyways. We need to just find orange cards in general to keep stringing along and do damage. So when we look at cards like 45% power, it's straight up just a free 4 high for 4. Going to have more free stats depending on what foundations we have. and it just says draw a card. It replaces itself. Imagine we call it a cantrip. It's perfect. Next up, we have Incubating. This card gives Toga so much defense on face. This foundation is kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting, even though it's only -1 speed. Giving it to every card that they play as an attack is pretty solid because usually they're not going to draw as many cards as us. We just need to block 1 or 2 moves, and then we can go from there. Turns on combined firepower when we need it. We can also block with the firepowers on defense when it activates them. It's just, we have 20 health. We got to make the most of it. So I just want to say real quick, thank everybody for watching. If you're enjoying the content I'm putting out, maybe consider dropping a sub. If not, that's completely fine too. I'm just doing this for fun, trying to show off some of the cool strategies and ideas that I have for the game that I just enjoy playing and have fun with and testing. And hope y'all enjoy them too. All right, that said, I hope y'all have a good one, and I'll catch y'all next time.